We live in a world that has made getting healthy harder than ever before. Ultra processed foods on every corner, schedules that leave no room for movement, and stress that never really switches off. And none of us need to even move our bodies at all if we don't want to. So we find ourselves in a situation today in Australia where two-thirds of adults are currently overweight or obese, and childhood obesity in Australia has tripled in the last 30 years. Our kids are not developing these habits in isolation. They're learning from us, from our relationship with food, from what they see on our plates, from what they see us do. So now we're not just managing our own health, we're shaping theirs. And that means that this conversation is more urgent now, today, than ever before. My guest today is a medical doctor at Alevia, a clinic dedicated to weight loss and obesity management, where she works with patients every single day who are not lazy, who are not undisciplined, and who are not lacking in motivation. They are people navigating a broken system with the wrong tools, and her job, her passion, is to give them the right ones. She brings together the science of medicine, the nuance of psychology, and a genuine deep respect for everyone who walks through that door. She's seen what works, a whole person approach, one that takes the science seriously and leaves the shame at the door. And today she's going to share it with us. And also, she happens to be my sister. So this one's personal. Hey, Nici, or Dr. Scheepers, I should probably call you,
Dr.
but
Nici is
you're
fine.
next to me. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this with me. I know we've been talking about it for quite a long time, and I think we just finally found the perfect moment and the time to do it. So thanks so much
Well,
for being here.
thank you. It's a privilege to come and talk to you and to share something that I feel very passionately about, and hope to share some thoughts and get the message out there to
Wonderful.
everybody.
Absolutely. Great. Yeah, so we've spoken about this matter at length. And I guess our challenge is going to be to try to keep it on point and not ramble off too much because we've got a lot of ground to cover. But before we get stuck into obesity management and the work that you do at Alevia, I think it's probably worthwhile starting at the beginning, and perhaps if you want to tell everyone who's listening about you and your medical journey and how you've come to work in this world of obesity management.
Well, I've been a doctor for 20 something years, and I've worked on 3 different continents and have had a wide range of experience, both in emergency medicine, psychiatry, and general practice as well. And while I enjoyed my patients and enjoyed my time, I became increasingly more frustrated by the level of real change that I could bring to my patients. Every now and then I would touch somebody's life and help and encourage and change and be a voice for change in that patient's life. But the vast majority of my interactions was limited in terms of my effectiveness. And that all changed with the advent of the first effective obesity medications, which started to become available in Australia. And all of a sudden, I had an opportunity to work with patients with effective management that would literally change people's lives, change people's health journey, and address a wide range of the problems that I was seeing day in and day out at my office, and truly get to the fundamentals about health care, which, when you're looking at overweight and obesity, underlies so much of the issues that patients face.
So by the time they come to Alevia, can you give us a sort of a snapshot of what their previous experience may have been like in trying to get help?
Well, Alevia has been a company, a viable company now for about 6 years, or 6 or 7 years. And the nature of our interaction with patients has changed considerably during that time. But I think the important um, first point of contact is that people are frustrated, scared, scared about their health, scared about their long-term prospects, have been trying for years and years to manage this condition without any significant long-standing success, and are feeling bewildered, frustrated, and very much alone. And what we do at our clinic, hopefully, is give that patient some avenue and some give
Yeah.
them a voice to share their experience, and then generate the individual changes that need to happen in that person's life to allow for long-standing and sustainable change. It's no one size fits all. It sometimes can feel like that, but it does very rapidly become a very individual and personal journey, which by being a weight loss dedicated practice, we have the time to do. And certainly, I think one of the changes that we've seen over the years is that more and more doctors and GPs are supporting their patients with prescriptions. But the challenge becomes the amount of time that can be spent to support people in making the changes that need to happen for long term and sustainable healthy change.
And I'm going to deep dive into that further on because, yes, that is very much a part of what For Your Life is all about. But I'm interested, obviously, people will have tried multiple other avenues to help, manage their weight. What do you think is the thing that really shifts people's mindset where they would, stop thinking and then decide this is it, I have to take action, now's the time?
Well, I think there are varying there are varying reasons why people come in. A lot of the time, people are prompted by changes in their health that become more and more critical that they need to address. We have a lot of women who are embarking on a fertility journey and need to improve or reduce their risks during pregnancy, reduce the risks of the investigations and the procedures that need to happen. We have patients who have orthopedic conditions or mobility issues, and of course, the important conditions of diabetes and heart disease. And people are often driven to address their weight when these issues start to loom on the horizon. But more and more patients are coming to talk to us because of the awareness that there is now effective strategies and are hoping for guidance in a medical and ethical approach, which we hopefully do a reasonable job at providing.
And I think you and I have spoken about this at length, but there seems to have been a shift in the sort of blame and the shame that's attached to people who do have obesity. So there's, I guess, a little more recognition of the multifactorial, multifaceted situation that has brought them to the place that they're at.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And love them or hate them, these medications are prompting the conversation and bringing the conversation on board. And people who have lived with overweight and obesity have had to deal with significant shame and guilt and a system and a public attitude that has created a lot of misery for patients from the patient or from the person who finds themselves not getting the help that they need in the store because they're overlooked or undervalued, or the person who attends a allied or a health professional and with a legitimate uh, ailment or an experience, and are then told that their experience and their health issue is related to their weight, where it might not always be a question of weight. And there's very good evidence that people who live with overweight and obesity have a much higher rate of under service, under investigation, and misdiagnosis to the patient who has to have a procedure, but there's not an adequate gown that the patient can protect their modesty, to the person who's trying to walk through a turnstile, or the person who's trying to fly and needing to then ask for additional
Yeah.
straps for their seatbelts. It is difficult to fully appreciate how often and to what extent people who live with overweight and obesity are having to deal with bias and stigma.
Mm. Oh, that's very, very sad. So, in your experience and with the patients that you've worked with over the journey, what do you feel are the sort of main factors that make it so difficult for people to lose weight just on their own without help?
Well, firstly, we need to eat to live. And if we don't eat, we die. And our genetics from those early hunter-gatherers days are primed to ensure our survival. And and the people who weren't able to survive famine were the people who didn't survive to pass on their genetics. So as humans, we are not designed to lose weight. We
Brilliant.
we are designed to put on
Yeah.
weight, and if we lose weight, then our bodies are
Fights
going
to
to
put it
be
back on again.
fighting you tooth and nail to get that weight back. And I think what people don't actually recognize is that weight is and overweight is like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg are the things that you can influence, like how you're eating and exercising, but the vast body of that iceberg is below the surface, and that represents things like genetics, things like epigenetics, that factors like how your mother ate while she was pregnant with you.
So can you talk a little more about epigenetics?
So epigenetics is the theory. I suppose these are all theories, but the evolutionary thought that while genetics themselves take a long time to evolve, there are factors that occur in our environment that can prompt changes a lot quicker. And certainly in terms of overweight and obesity, epigenetic factors will include things like how your mom ate when she was pregnant with you, how you ate in the first 4 years of your life. Stress can exert an epigenetic effect. Pregnancy can exert an epigenetic effect. And that means that those genes are expressed differently or even switched on. And once those genes are switched on, they don't
They
switch
don't switch off
Yeah,
easily. No.
that's it.
Yeah.
Um,
That's so fascinating. So I think there's I guess a misconception that yeah, all you need to do is eat less and exercise more, and it's
sad fact of
really not
life that
helpful because
most people have been told, oh, you
yeah,
just need to cut back on your eating and move more. And the reality is that this is a rapidly evolving science. There is a lot of information that we have now we didn't have 5 years ago. There are research studies that are raising very interesting questions that need to be answered. And we also don't know what we don't know. So 5 years from now, this field is going to look very different to what it is at the moment.
so take me through a typical journey. So a patient comes in and sees you. What would be the approach that you would follow from, I guess, the first meeting, and then what you typically see happens in subsequent weeks and months? And
So, the first meeting is a little bit about trying to understand the patient's journey, understand their environment, and the factors that have influenced their health and their journey to this point. We need to make sure that that there is nothing that's unrecognized, that this is a safe place, safe process for patients, and safety and medical ethics has to always take preference, but also to create a little bit of an atmosphere of trust where people have a sense that they are heard. A lot of our patients have not been heard, and recognize that there is that there has been a lot of times they have tried very hard. What they're doing is not. Uh, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to be experiencing what they've experienced.
mm,
And most patients have tried multiple times and not been able to see success. So initially, that first appointment is to try and create a safe place for our patients to start this journey. It is very much an exercise in trust, but then also to check and make sure that from a medical point of view, we're addressing or identifying factors that will have influenced their weight journey and that need to be addressed. at a later date, usually,
Yeah.
but also to make sure that that from a health point of view, this is a safe process for them to start.
Mm.
And that's the start. I think most people,
Yes. Starting it is very different to continuing
yes,
on the journey.
yeah.
Yes. So I'm sure when the motivation levels are high, and I'm sure that they've come to see you and they finally feel like they're in the right place, that someone's really understanding. So then what happens next?
Well, I want to just touch on that a little bit. I think a lot of people have an idea of why they're coming, but sometimes those motivations can be quite superficial. And I think the people that we often don't connect well with are people who feel that they've been forced to come
Oh,
in. Either their wife has booked their appointment or
oh no.
their orthopedic surgeon has said, you've got to lose XYZ.
Yeah.
And often there is that sense of coercion or sense of almost resentment. I wouldn't want to say
Mm,
resentment, but a feeling that this is somebody else directing your
yeah.
fate. So I think it's really important to try and identify what are those values and those motivations that are deeply personal, and it's not always apparent. Sometimes we can see it at the start of the journey. Sometimes it emerges over time. But the more one can connect with why you are looking at needing to change, what that change represents for you, what is the area? Why are you suffering? That those are the factors that will help you to keep going when
Yeah.
the going is tough.
100%. And I talk about this a lot in my podcast and in everything that I write, that you have to start with why. And the why needs to be something meaningful. It needs to be your why at a deeply personal level. And it's very often something that's, a bigger picture. So I'm
Mm.
doing this because I need my children to
I want to
have the
play
right
with my
habits. I want
kids.
to live a long and healthy life. I want to have a baby, whatever it is, but it's something big and life changing.
I want to be around for my kids. I want to be
Yeah.
around for my grandkids.
Yeah.
Um, and often people will recognize what their motivation is in retrospectoscope. They'll start off thinking that this is that, but having experienced the change in their quality of life, or they then start to recognize what that means for them as a person, and that then becomes an ongoing motivating factor.
Yes, and then we were talking earlier on about how that sort of shifts their identity and they start
Mm,
seeing themselves in a different way, and
correct.
yeah, and yeah, building that self-fulfilling circle, which I love. Um, so you spoke earlier on about genes and how once they're turned on, it's very difficult to switch them off.
Can't switch them off.
Can't switch them off. So talk about some of the other factors that make weight loss just so difficult.
Well, again, I think it's important to understand that this is an evolving science, and we have models to explain what we're seeing and experiencing, but these models might change over time and are evolving. But I think what I like to really to talk about in a simplistic way is, again, as humans, we're not designed to lose weight. Whatever the reason is that has resulted in us putting on weight, our bodies are very determined to protect those energy stores. It's all about survival of the species. And weight and eating behaviors is tightly controlled by the hypothalamus. Now, the hypothalamus is a part of your brain that controls other vital functions like your heart rate and your blood pressure and your temperature. And you can't decide to be a temperature of 36 because you feel like it. It's not under your control. So it's the same thing with eating behaviors and weight loss. It is controlled by a part of your brain that you have no influence over. And yes, lifestyle changes do come into it, but genes are going to account for 40 to 70% of the differences we see between individuals. And then that doesn't take into account those epigenetic factors that we were talking about as well.
Goodness. All right. So lots to discuss there. Um, if we look at the things that we can change, that obviously lifestyle, and things like that. But how do you? What are the factors that you would look at that are within a person's ability to change and control, and how long does it take?
Well, it does obviously depend on the individual, but the science is clear that if and BMI is not my favorite thing. BMI is not really appropriate for an individual, but the science does refer to BMI. But there are different classes of obesity, and once you have reached a certain class of obesity, the science is clear that you are more likely to achieve significant weight loss that improves your health and sustained weight loss if you're using a medical or surgical intervention along with lifestyle, behavioral, psychological change as well.
Okay.
And that's what I do. That's my job,
Yeah.
is to try and discuss the varied medical and surgical strategies that are available to help people to support their goals.
Yeah.
The reality is, with diet and exercise, very few people are able to reach their goals. Your body's defenses will ramp up when you're starting to cut back on calories, and most people are not able to get to that goal weight before their intervention or their strategy collapses. And what I think most people don't recognize is that though your body's defenses remain activated for a very long time, your weight would have to be stable for as long as 6 years before your body's defenses
Wow.
will actually switch off. And in that time, your body is prompting and promoting you to gain weight. So that rebound weight gain is not a failure. It's your body behaving the way it's designed to
Right.
behave.
For
That
your
is a
survival out
natural
in the savannah.
that's a
In
natural
the caveman.
response, and thank you to your body for taking care of you and ensuring you get through that
Yeah.
terrible famine that
That might
threatened
one
to
day,
take you out.
is it may one day in 6 years' time
But
appear.
97% of people will have regained the weight that they've lost within 2 years, and usually a little bit of padding. So you get this
Oof.
incremental increase that everybody has experienced who has
Mm.
lived with overweight and obesity.
You were saying earlier on that it's not a one fits all
Absolutely.
approach. So it does take the time to meet with the patient, understand everything that's going on, do the tests,
Absolutely.
assess their basic metabolic functions and things.
To make sure that there's no underlying conditions, but also to listen to what that patient needs and what is going to be compatible with their thoughts for their health. It's very much a team approach, and I think it's really important that it is a team approach. It's not just a question of providing a script.
Yes, yes, team-based approach. So, what are some of the health management or weight management strategies that you would recommend? Like, what's the
Well, my bias, of course, is that I work in a medical sphere, and certainly, again, I need to identify what the patient is looking for. A lot of patients aren't aware of the role of bariatric surgery, for example, and a lot of people think that bariatric surgery is only intended for people who have moribund obesity, who are
Mm,
bedbound, where the reality is that the tipping point can be as little as a BMI of 35, which
really?
it's a recent change in recommendations. And people don't necessarily understand that bariatric surgery is metabolic surgery. It's not a question of making your tummy smaller. Medications, for example, might influence one or two receptors in the brain, whereas bariatric surgery may influence as many as 7 receptors that we know of, but also impact other pathways, both in the brain
Mm,
and in the body, that are involved in the metabolic feedback loop that addresses or influences overweight and
right.
obesity. So people are often very afraid of surgery, but I think it's important to recognize it as a very important tool in terms of management.
Mm.
But my area is medications.
So
Um,
let's talk about that because I know a lot of people are very interested in, and it's just blowing up, isn't
of
it,
course,
everywhere? So,
yes.
can you take us through how these drugs have come to be
Fantastic.
and the
Well,
history and where we're at now?
the early sciences or the early evidence that we had for this metabolic um, model for overweight and obesity was the identification of leptin, where poor little mice,
Poor little.
had their leptin gene excised, and it significantly impacted their weight. But we've come to understand again that there are there are receptors in the brain and the body that influence eating and eating behaviors, and medications that are now available that can target that. We've had appetite medications for many years. Phentermine has been around forever, but with the advent of the newer class of medications, we have now a range of very potent and powerful medications that support people in changing their eating behaviors.
Very okay. So the burning question I always get asked, because they say, "Oh, your sister's works for Alevia, and can you ask her?" And I need to find out what happens when you stop taking these
All right.
medications.
We need to recognize that, firstly, medications are not a silver bullet. They are an adjunct, and medications don't cause weight loss. Weight loss comes from your genetics, how you're eating and exercising, and that has to be part of the role. But certainly, if you fall into that class of patients who, where there is that scientific evidence that they will benefit, you're more likely to achieve your weight loss goals and improve your health significantly. But we also need to recognize that these are powerful medications and they need to be used in an appropriate and in a safe fashion. They are not medications designed for you to avoid eating. And I think a lot of the times people run into trouble because of some of the myths that are out there with the use of the medications. And certainly that often results in the stories that we've all heard and seen on the media. So firstly, these medications need to be appropriately prescribed, monitored, and patients do need to address their lifestyle as well as their nutrition to ensure that they land up in a place where they are more able to sustain their weight. It is also not a rapid process where you get to your goal weight and that's it. We know that the body is going to be fighting, so there is a need for treatment in maintenance as well, and there does need to be a bit more work done about that. But certainly, we don't. I would definitely not advocate stopping medication when you've achieved your target weight. You do need a period of maintenance, and that's going to be different for everybody. This is a metabolic condition, and people have metabolic conditions that require lifelong treatment. But a large number of patients certainly are able to stop medication and see long-term weight maintenance as well.
Okay.
The take-home message, though, is that this is not a curable condition. It is a chronic, genetic, metabolic condition that is a lifelong condition and requires a long-term support. And that means surveillance. If you have diabetes or if high blood pressure, you're going to be seeing your GP 3 or 4 times in a year to monitor that condition. And the same applies with the metabolic condition of obesity and overweight.
Yeah. That's really, I think, is a shift in the thinking that it is a metabolic condition.
Yeah.
It's not just,
And I think that might be a hard message for people to hear. I personally believe this is a crossroads in medicine, akin to washing hands before you deliver a baby. The midwives at the time informed the doctor who first advocated this practice. And he could see that the patients who were delivered by midwives had better outcomes than some of the patients who were delivered by doctors, who would often come straight from the autopsy room and deliver the baby.
Oh, dear.
But he was laughed out of his practice, and he actually ended up in a mental health institution because he was so shamed. And now it's established practice.
And now it's obvious.
We are of an age where we saw the advent of effective treatments for depression. And I remember at the time when people who were very vocally against treatments, antidepressants, it's just pull up your socks and get on with it, stiff upper lip. But it's now an acceptable model that depression is a chemical condition, that there is a biological model for depression.
That responds to medication.
And it is a very accepted treatment strategy to use medications. And I think overweight and obesity is going to have a similar evolution in the general understanding, but it is slow and it's going to
Slow.
take time.
Yeah. So you were talking earlier on about how hard it is, and I think people don't really realize or appreciate how hard it is to lose weight. Like, what are we talking? How long a process? Like, if someone's wanting to lose, I don't know, 20, 30 kilos, a year or 2 years, how long does it take?
How long is a piece of
Depends.
string?
Yeah. I knew I said
This
that.
is genetic,
Yeah.
I think the people do need to see other people succeeding, and certainly we've seen that shift where a lot of our patients are now coming because of word of mouth or seeing advice on social media, etc. But the comparison is the thief of joy, and we all have individual journeys to make. But the important, again, the important take-home message is that it's not about getting to a certain point; it's about starting, and health improves before we see any changes on the scales. If you are changing your lifestyle, you're improving your health. And it's not about a number on the scales. It's about making change that are sustainable and support your long-term health. But it is different. And Mary blogs next door who weighs the same as you and is doing the same as you is going to have a very different journey to you. Um, the 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 more rapid the weight loss, the more problematic that can be. Um, we we want to lose weight in a safe way and in a way that sets you up for maintenance, that allows you to keep that weight off. It's a hard process. We don't want to do it more than once. But that also then allows you time to develop your lifestyle habits that are critical to achieving success. And certainly there has been a lot of media commentary about people who use medications and then stop and have weight rapidly come back. And that's a difficult one to unpack. But part of that is it is still important to develop health and lifestyle and behavioral changes that are going to support long-term change. And that addresses the insidious and far-reaching nature of food and eating in our culture. And it takes time to unpack what that means for each patient and how that has to change. So medications are not a silver bullet. We do need to dive into the psychology. Initially, it's about the medications, but very quickly it becomes about the psychology, and that can really be complex. So I suppose the important thing is to recognize that it's not a curable condition,
Yeah.
firstly, but secondly, that we do need to understand what eating and food represents for that person, and address those issues as
Interest
they
that way.
arise.
Yeah. What have there been sort of any standouts or takeaways that you've observed that give you kind of the pointers as to what types of people are more successful in losing weight and keeping it off? What are the key
What are the key things?
criteria? Yeah.
I think people who have a clear understanding of their motivation and who have a personal connection with that motivation, where that is something that is really important to them, they're more likely to stay the distance. The second is the person who has a team. The team
Mm.
approach is fundamental, and there is very clear evidence that you're more likely to achieve your goals when you've got a team on board, and that's your partner, that's your friend, that's your family, that's your bariatric dietitian, your exercise physiologist, the psychologist, the psychiatrist. These are all people that have a role to play, and you're more likely to achieve those long-term changes when you have a team approach. The people who are not afraid to fail, remember fail, first attempt in learning,
Yeah.
they're the people who, and who have the courage to come back
To
and
come
to keep
back.
going. They're the people that are going to have long-term success. It is not a linear process. It's not a straight line, but it is a keep-on process that I think becomes important. People who are willing to explore and willing to listen to the expertise of others. I think people put up a lot of barriers about weight management, especially because most people I see have been doing this for a very long time
Mm.
and have been told, have been given a lot of information along the way. Some of it's good information, some of it's not so good information. There was a lot of snake oil
Sure.
operators out there,
Mm.
and so sometimes it's about being open to the process. Um, and that process might not always be clear, but there is method to the madness a lot of the times
Mm.
when we're recommending strategies and
Yeah.
treatment. But that's where the trust comes in, that there is that trust relationship, that ultimately you have that patient's best interests at heart. And it might sound very, I don't know,
Yeah.
sausage factory in a
Yeah.
way, but there is a
There
process.
is
We're
a
laying down
trust
some
the process.
fundamentals, we're putting down the foundations, and
Yeah.
we're building the
We're
house.
building the house, like Dad always used to say.
Correct.
It's really interesting. I think I do feel for people who struggle to lose weight and they blame themselves and they try diet after diet after diet and it's just not working. And I mean, the clock's ticking and life goes by and 10 years later, nothing's shifted.
The message is getting out there that there are a range of strategies for people. And even if medication or surgery is not for you, getting the advice of a GP who has an interest in weight management because it is complex, getting advice of a bariatric dietitian. And dietitians will always give you good advice, but there are different approaches when it comes to weight loss. Um, and who are willing to start that conversation and explore their challenges. People often will talk about that they very shamefacedly will say, "I don't want this to be an excuse, but this is my excuse," kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I like to say, well, there's no excuses. There are roadblocks and challenges, and it's understanding what those challenges are. Once you can start to appreciate those challenges, and then we can start to come up with solutions.
Solutions.
And the solution might not be the first one you try. It might take coming back to the drawing board and trying again,
Yeah. Mm.
and we might have to have plan A and plan B and plan C solutions as well.
Yeah.
But it is again having that courage to keep on persevering.
Mm. What do you enjoy the most about your role and working for Alevia and working with these patients? What do you love the most about it?
I I value the long-term relationships I develop with my patients. That is an incredible position of trust, and it's something that I loved to explore. I loved developing that connection with people over time. I love seeing people's health improve in ways that they've not been able to recognize. Uh, Often are surprised by, but can see. I can, the patient who has that successful pregnancy, the patient who brings that diabetes into remission or prediabetes into remission, a patient whose gastroenterologist is thrilled because they were on the cusp of needing a liver transplant and now are doing so much
Wow.
better. And not to mention the changes in the quality of life. That for me is incredibly fulfilling, and
Yeah.
I feel that when I can connect and hopefully understand what the patient's needs are, um, I feel that I have been able to be a fulcrum for people to access the care that they need, and from the range of people that we've already spoken about, in a way that enables them and empowers them to live with this condition day in and day out and make choices that are going to help them to reach their own goals.
Wonderful. And I really hope that now, with the shift in how we're thinking about obesity and weight management and access to medications and in more holistic approaches, that we will move towards coming up with a solution to this epidemic, this worldwide epidemic, so that people can live long and healthy lives and yeah and also be that example for their children and the next generation so we
Absolutely.
can stop this. Yeah, it's been lovely talking to you. I've just been, yeah, wanting to do this for so long, and I'm happy that we finally done it. It's been great talking to you, and the good thing is I get to talk to you about it anytime I want to, which is wonderful.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about something I'm very passionate about. And Alevia stems from alleviate,
Yes.
the opportunity to alleviate the physical, the psychological, and the behavioral burden that people living with obesity and overweight experience in their day-to-day lives.
Well, they'd be very lucky to have you as a doctor. So thank you.